Hi, welcome to Boxed Out. I'm Amanda Lynn, your host, and I'm here with Lincoln Borman, the director of the San Juan County Land Bank. Lincoln and I have been having a really great discussion around how the Conservation Land Bank actually is a critical piece of providing affordable housing to our community. And when we last left the audience, we were chatting a bit about the mission of conservation that the land bank really has as a primary piece of what it's doing. And as a housing advocate, I am always looking at things intersectionally. The reason I work in housing is because I know it's the anchor to all of the other challenges that our communities face. And I think that one of the reasons I believe the land bank is such an important piece of the puzzle is its opportunity to provide healthy air, clean water, and sustainable land to a community. And I wonder, could you talk a little bit about how the land bank does this and what is in your 100-year plan for
Right.
the island?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at how to prioritize, one of the things that's become increasingly important is really the fact that things are changing a lot. The climate's changing. And whether you want to call it climate change or not, the reality is, our weather is getting less and less predictable. And it's going to be up to us to have a landscape that can actually stand up to those changes. And so when we're looking at the overall lay of the islands and trying to figure out, well, what's really important, what properties are important. One of the things that emerges is, okay, we don't have to make this up on our own. We have other organizations like the Nature Conservancy, which have looked at these questions and done analyses to show, what are the most resilient places, and they've applied that to this archipelago as well. And so what we're finding is resiliency really stems out of a few key concepts. One is having a contiguous, undeveloped area that's in good shape, forest that's a healthy forest, having topographic diversity, so that as it gets hotter on the south side of a hill, species can actually shift to the top or over the top to the north side of the hill, and they'll be more resilient as we go forward. And so we're looking at these larger landscapes. It's one of our real priorities. It's difficult, given the fact that so much of the islands is in some phase of development. So when I map it out, I look at something I call the development matrix. And if you look at the primary islands, the bigger ferry-served islands, we're talking about 2/3 of the whole being in that matrix. So it's already got a house on it. It's been put into a smaller lot. Maybe there are vacant lots in that matrix, but they're between developed properties. And so those aren't really great candidates for conservation. And what we're looking to do is really connect the best of what we've got left together to create a landscape that will function well. And where we have properties which fit that criterion, but may not be in the greatest shape, that's kind of the next phase for us, and that's what we've shifted into really heavily. It's not just about acquiring properties and great, we've got it, it's fine, everything's good. There are a lot of properties out there which don't function well. There are old fields that have grown up into unhealthy stands of forest trees, and they're prone to fire. And so we're really, and this is one area where we're doing a lot to bring outside resources to the table, trying to manage those properties to create healthy forests, so thinning them, taking the biomass that we get and turning it into biochar, or in some cases, actually, we are making that available to people who might need firewood, even though that's maybe not carbon neutral, but a good thing to do, to make sure that people can heat their houses. And the vast majority of this will be a carbon sink, because if you have a healthy forest, it's going to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. If you have a healthy forest floor, healthy understory, all of those things go into creating this much better system, something that will work the way you want it to work. It'll absorb water instead of letting it run off the ground into the ocean. And a lot of the properties that we buy are generally in the headwater areas because we're buying higher elevation properties. And that's where, when you look at our precipitation maps, most of the precipitation is hitting those higher elevation areas. So protecting those in the area around them, the streams that come out of those, the aquifers that come off of those, it all starts at the top.
So effectively protecting our drinking water.
Exactly. And so one good example is with the town of Friday Harbor, where we've put a lot of effort into protecting the watershed around Trout Lake, which is the town's reservoir. And at this point, we've conserved 20% of that reservoir to help protect that drinking water source, and also to help keep that area around the lake functional, to keep it working well as a system. You don't want to have a watershed going to a reservoir that's got a lot of development in it, that has pollutants in it. You want to keep it as pristine as possible. And so that's what we're doing. And doing that forest management is also key, because if you've got that great watershed, it looks good on paper and everything, but it's unhealthy, and you have a fire issue, then you're also going to have a huge problem with your drinking water.
True, yeah.
So managing those properties effectively is really important, and we've been doing that in that watershed at the periphery, and now I think because of some of those efforts, the town is getting some resources to really carry that work on inside the watershed. So the whole system will function better.
Yeah, and again, thinking about how these things relate to each other, having, as you said, not having development within these critical areas for our clean water, instead keeping the development within the urban growth area and protecting that land. It's not always so obvious on the surface how these things are working together, but they absolutely are working together to provide a healthy community as a whole. Can you talk a little, you mentioned sort of doing stewardship on the land, that's what I hear you saying, and doing fire mitigation work and making sure that the forests are healthy. And I wonder how the land bank typically allocates resources. For example, what percentage of funds go to purchasing property versus stewarding it?
Right.
And how would that shift if the REIT isn't renewed? What would happen?
Well, first of all, it's that those percentages have changed dramatically over the last probably 10 years. And in our current budget, almost half of the funds that we're bringing in are going toward stewardship. It used to be very, very different. You know, if when we were more of a caretaker organization, we were spending a lot less on stewardship. Now we're doing all of this active management. It's not cheap, which is why we're also very intent in finding external funds to help us with that work. So it's already shifting, even with the REIT in place. If we lost the REIT funding, we would basically go all the way back to that caretaker mode. We would not be able to afford to do this more extensive management to really create these healthier forests. It's just too costly. We would have to cut staff, and we would have to really think about the properties that we have. It would be a very, very dramatic shift, without question.
Yeah. I wonder, is the land bank able to, again, just thinking intersectionally, is the land bank able to now, or maybe hopeful to in the future, provide local jobs for that land stewardship and be able to provide that through our own local workforce?
Yeah, and we've been doing some of that without a doubt. I mean, we have our own small staff, but a lot of the work that we're having done is being done through conservation corps crews, and there are a variety of those. So one of the things we really helped get going was the Youth Conservation Corps, which is really taking kids who are in middle school, high school, and getting them experience with land management, paying them to do the work. And we've now seen, I think, at least 300 kids come through that program over the last 10 years or so, which is great.
Yeah.
There's also a new conservation corps, the Islands Conservation Corps, which is composed of folks, not necessarily people who are living here, but people associated with Western Washington University, so some residents, some not, but really pulling people in and having them here year-round, so they're becoming residents and they're working on that landscape, and that's what we prefer to do, is have people function like that. We have the Washington Conservation Corps, which is bringing students or young people in their 20s from elsewhere to do that work too. But we also use contractors to do a lot of work, particularly if we're getting a site ready for public access, or some of this you just have to hire a contractor who has the right equipment to do the work. And so we're pretty committed to hiring local contractors. So I think there are a lot of jobs that are actually resulting in from the management that we're doing, and we'll continue to see that grow, hopefully.
Does the Conservation Land Bank face similar challenges to other employers around finding that workforce because they don't have housing? Is that something you all have seen?
It's for the Conservation Corps crews, it's less of an issue because if it's Youth Conservation Corps, they've grown up here. They're still living with their parents.
Yeah.
For other folks, like for our staff, that's always an issue. If we're hiring people, we're really looking, the ideal candidate for us if we're hiring someone is someone who's already here because housing is such a critical issue. I think we've been very fortunate in our staff that we've had resourceful people who have managed to find places, but it's harder and harder to do, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's affecting everybody. So our contractors who are who can't find people to do the work, it's a problem. They can't get the job done. So more and more, you're absolutely right. Finding that housing, it's just a missing piece for a lot of things.
And the county's been able to step in and use the land bank as a tool to address that. We talked a little bit about projects out in the county with Lopez and Orcas. And also there's the Argyle project in Friday Harbor, which is the land bank has been a key part of making that happen. Can you give a little history about how that property was acquired and reallocated for affordable housing?
Absolutely. So that property was purchased back in 2002 as part of an effort to conserve the Argyle neighborhood. There was a lot of concern that the old houses, which were in the neighborhood, were being torn down. And that it was going to become something very different. So the historic preservation mission was originally what got us got us involved in the neighborhood. And those lots were purchased with the idea that whatever's built there will fit within the context of the neighborhood. Back in about 2015, 16, the council really started to look closely at that property, and they made the decision that this would be a great property to use for affordable housing. And so we sold the property to the county council, and now it's proceeded from there. So it's a great synergy. I would also add that we purchased the property across the street from those lots, which is where our administrative office is. When you see this picture in the background, that's our building. But what you're looking at in the foreground is open space in the community. And that's going to be right across the street from this new housing development. So we're expecting to see a lot more people out there as the development happens.
It's a really cool example of local control, and I don't think many other rural communities have been able to effectively do something like that. It again speaks to that really kind of go-getter nature that islanders have around solving our problems, and maybe folks know or don't know that the sort of end result after the county council purchased that piece of property was, another several year planning process to create that affordable housing using major investment from the home fund, which is actually one of the few public resources that can serve moderate income people. And we know on our island, as you mentioned, folks in your staff, folks in our public works department, people that work in our hospital, our EMTs, our caregivers, lots of these people maybe fall on the line of qualifying for affordable housing. So we've known, as you mentioned, there's this real need in our
Right.
workforce in Friday Harbor and on San Juan Island. And so I think there was a lot, as a housing advocate, I've really appreciated the foresight that the county had in creating an opportunity for that workforce housing
Right.
that we know is so needed. And I think it's such a good example of, again, localized control. When the home fund was created out of the REIT, the very same funding source that we've been talking about that funds the land bank, we were able to build it in a way that we need it and that can serve our local community. And that's a really powerful thing. And again, it is all tied together. The conservation land bank, the housing REIT, and the ultimate home fund is what will create 40 units of permanently affordable housing
Right.
in our little rural island, which is not easy to do. So that's really cool. I hope that people will keep that history in mind and consider other ways that the land bank could be used for wider community needs. I think at the end
Right.
of the day, it's important to remember, and you probably agree with me, Lincoln, that the conservation land bank is actually a tool. It's a resource for us that we get to use in ways that work well for our community to keep it healthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're always happy to hear from people. People have ideas about what we should do. There are lots of people with ideas out here,
Yes.
which is great. And we love hearing from them. So
Yeah.
we're open to any kind of communication. All of our meetings obviously are public, and you can chat into the meeting if you want to. We always have public comment periods for everything.
Awesome.
So happy to hear from the community.
Great. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break, and then we will be back to chat a little more and finish out our episode. Welcome back to Boxed Out. I'm your host, Amanda Lynn, and I'm here with Lincoln Borman, the director of the San Juan County Conservation Land Bank. Lincoln and I have been chatting today about how conservation and housing work together, and how, in fact, the conservation REIT and the housing REIT that we have in our county are so critically important as tools for local control. And I want to just touch, before we went to commercial break, Lincoln, you were talking about the participation of the public in what the land bank does. And I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit and talk a little bit about the land bank as a government body.
Right. Well, I think one of the important things about the land bank is the fact that really we have a commission which is appointed by the county council. So there's 7 members of the community who serve as volunteers. They're out in the community. If you go to our website, you can find their phone numbers. They're happy to talk to you about all manner of things that related to the land bank, as are all the staff. All of our information is on the website. It's public. Every meeting we have is open to the public. It's recorded. You can go back and look at it over and over again if you want to. If you're feeling sleepless some night, you can tune in. But that's everything. You know, it's our budgeting. It's the decision-making process that happens. It's the discussion around that. And it's hearing from the public directly. So it's all open, just as we're subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, just like everybody else in the county or any other government in the state. So we function as openly as possible. The only time we go into executive session generally is going to be about purchasing a particular property, and that's at the very front end. And the concern there is we want to have things kind of lined up so that there's no possibility of us having to pay more for the property than we have to. But once a contract is signed, then there's a lot of discussion. I think in one, I'm remembering an acquisition we had a few years ago, and there was, I did hear some complaints about, well, we didn't know about it. And I looked back over the year prior. or more, multiple years in that case. And we'd had, I think, 20 meetings where we talked about this project. So I think we kind of covered it.
Yeah.
But we also recognize that it's really hard for people.
True.
You know, they're not generally waking up thinking, boy, I wish I could watch that Land Bank Commission meeting today. So we know we need to do as good a job as we can to reach out to people directly. So we're putting information out on Facebook. We're doing a quarterly newsletter. We have an annual report that comes out. We're really trying to get information out. We also do community conversations, so special meetings in the evening in case people are working during the day and they don't have an opportunity to tune in. And we have a remote option for all of our meetings as well. So it's not necessary to come over to San Juan to participate. You can just do it from your living room for the most part.
So people can track the land bank on Facebook. They can, I'm guessing, sign up for the newsletter at your website.
Yes.
And be able to track the public meetings there. And also, there is an incredibly vast, in prepping for this episode, got to go and check out for the first time, really, the incredibly vast amount of just data that is available about every transaction the land bank's ever done. As you said, every meeting that's ever been had, it's all there, which is pretty cool. But I think in particular, I mean, you really touched on it. There's so much stuff flying at us. There's so much stuff flying at people, especially right now. Folks are struggling to make ends meet. They're working multiple jobs. It is summer on San Juan Island, you know.
Right.
So there's so many things that come at us. And I think, I hope that people will sign up for the newsletter because the land bank is such a critical piece of the larger healthy community that we are trying to build. And particularly for those interested in housing, I think this year is a really important year to track what the land bank is doing, how the land bank works, and not only that, but to talk to your neighbors and friends about it and help them understand how much the land bank and housing work together. I think it's so important as we approach November to ensure that we keep these community resources available. So with all of that, Lincoln, I'm really grateful to you for coming on. I learned a lot today. I hope our audience did too, and I appreciate you being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Lincoln. And to our audience, we'll see you all in another week on the next episode of Boxed Out, a conversation on affordable housing. Thanks for being here.